Hello and welcome to the Qatar GP post-race show powered by the Intermission Sports. I'm your host, Sam Donzik, joined by TJD here. How you doing today, TJ?
Doing good. First race in Qatar, and it wasn't too bad, really.
Yeah, no, it had its moments where it was definitely more exciting in certain parts, and then we definitely had more we didn't get to see a Hamilton Verstappen battle, which I think a lot of us were hoping to see in terms of like actual wheel-to-wheel racing, but it just clearly sees that it clearly showed that Hamilton just had the pace going into Qatar, and it just showed all weekend long that he just was above the Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Like they tried to really play it close with like certain pit stops, but every time Verstappen came into pit, Hamilton pitted, and he had the buffer of the time. So he was like, there was really no worry on Mercedes side. But what was really interesting as well is obviously Bottas dropping down, and then obviously not having to finish this race, which obviously meant that obviously the fastest point was not really able for Hamilton to like take or have Bottas take that away from either Verstappen or Perez in terms of the Red Bull, which was unfortunate, but got to see a double Red Bull finish in terms of like the high points area, as well as only a single Mercedes finished as well. So yeah. All right, one thing I want to talk about as well is the team strategies that possibly have gone wrong, as we saw multiple punctures throughout the race. Obviously, George Russell, Valtteri Bottas, Nicholas Latifi. Lando Norris was probably on the verge of getting one. I think he did get a small one, but he reported it early enough that he didn't lose track position, and he was able to come home, I think, P9. So they saved that one there a little bit. Do you think it was more on the team strategies and not really Pirelli that kind of failed them in terms of, because we saw it before, and obviously I think it was Silverstone 2019, 2020, when the tires just blew up at a certain point, and even also Azerbaijan this past year. Do you think that's more on the team strategies or on Pirelli itself?
Well, here you can only blame the teams and their strategists, because Pirelli brought their three hardest compounds of the five that they've got. So, I mean, teams trying to push the one stop on these like really rough curbs on the outside, the green and white curbs. That's what really killed the tires. So, I mean, it was always going to be tricky to make the one stop work anyway. But the curbs outside of the maroon and white curbs, the really thick curbs on the outside, those are what effectively killed the tires. And we heard it a few times during the race as well. People were told to. Alonso was told to stay off the curbs, stay off the outside curbs. So this one is down to the teams. You can't, because you saw like punctures like pretty much everywhere. Like, Bottas had to retire, Latifi retired, and there, a few others had to stop as well. I mean, Lando Norris did get away with it because they called him in, obviously, and that saved him a couple of points. But this one, it was really down to the teams, because a one stop was always going to be tricky here. And this track was not built for Formula One; it was built for MotoGP. So
for sure, yeah.
So they could afford to have those really abrasive curves on the outside on the track. So, whether Formula One was ill prepared for that or Pirelli was ill prepared for that, I don't think. Pirelli did what they could. Maybe if they had a sixth harder set, that they probably would have used that. But Pirelli's hands were more or less tied, so this one's down to the teams.
No, for sure. I think as well, Pirelli said is like, well, they said like hypothetically going is like, okay, like we've given you the possible toughest or hardest tire sets we have. I don't know exactly if they're like the C2, C3, like whatever it is, but they said, okay, you have to just use that and be mindful of that, because obviously they're going to a new track where it's used to being run on a MotoGP track. And again, it was just drivers running wide. I think past where it's like it was white triangles, that was where they were hitting, where the tires were getting the punctures as well, just running wide in those certain parts as well. So again, that's just down to team strategy, because I think it said that when Valtteri Bottas had gone 33 laps on the hard tire, I think it was the hard tires that he went on to. I think they only said they lasted 30 laps or something like that. So he had gone 3 laps over the max, and I was like, okay, being Mercedes, how do you screw something up like that when the team is like, okay, like Pirelli's okay, like they last 30 laps, but obviously sometimes we see like Lewis Hamilton go over that limit because of how well he can drive. But again, being at a different track, a new track, that you're not really familiar with, I think you should stick to those guidelines where they're saying, okay, if it's 30 laps, let's pit on lap 29 to not ruin anything as well. To not, and it ended up costing Mercedes major in the in the constructors battle, with obviously losing out a major amount of points with Bottas, because he possibly could have finished P5, P4 up there with possibly Perez or somewhere around there to keep it close in the constructors battles, but eventually did not do that, which was too bad for them, but that was their decision that they made. So
yeah, but I think, I mean, like you said, they lost a lot of points in the constructors battle, but that's why they wanted to push it. I mean,
yeah,
you saw Verstappen come in early, you saw Hamilton come in early, you saw Perez come in early, but they left Bottas out. I mean, in the first round of stops.
yeah.
I mean, whether that played a factor, who knows? But they had to try something, and
for sure, yeah.
I mean, this was really the only thing they could try, just to see how different strategies would work. And Bottas had the grid penalty from what happened yesterday in qualifying. So, I mean, they had to go for something different. Whether this was the right call, in hindsight, obviously not. But
Right.
But they had to do something. And Bottas is not really known for making his way through the field. Whenever he usually gets bad starts for whatever reason. But and he always has difficulty trying to overtake other cars that Hamilton seemingly doesn't have, whether it's because Hamilton has the supposedly better car, or whether the car is built more towards Hamilton's driving style, that who knows. But they had to do something different, and it didn't work out. And when you're in a championship battle that's this close for driver and constructors championships, you have to go big. And
yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, it just didn't work out this time.
No, and as well, I think Bottas he didn't get the best start, which I think cost him a little bit there at the beginning, because let's say hypothetically he does get a good start in that way, then obviously the strategy is a little bit different. But with Bottas already down in P11, where Verstappen was up in P4 at the start of the race, and obviously eventually made up his way to P2. But I think we all knew that as well. Again, it was a super early stop from Red Bull, like lap 18, I think. Verstappen came in, and then right after Hamilton covered, and then Perez came in as well, I think like a few laps later. So, and then they decided to leave Bottas out. So again, it was a decision where sometimes it doesn't always work out. And again, you're not always going to get it perfect. You're not going to be perfect at what you do. You're going to try the best as a possibility and plan as much as you can. And they just got it wrong today. But who knows? In Saudi Arabia, they might get it right, and they might, extend their lead in the Constructors Championship as well. But it was a close battle nonetheless, for sure. Yeah. And another interesting thing is Fernando Alonso got on the podium, P3. I think a lot of people were happy to see that. He had an excellent drive, not only from qualifying, obviously got bumped up due to the grid penalty, but regardless, he still held his position and came home to finish P3, his first podium since, I believe, Budapest in 2014. So 7 years. Just quite, realistically, it was good. It was good to see as well, as much as I wanted to see, Perez catch Alonso to take the podium to get the double points finish or double podium for Red Bull. It was great to see Alonso on the podium.
Yeah, everyone loves Fernando Alonso, and when he left in 2018 to try other things, IndyCar, World Endurance Championship, it genuinely did feel like Formula One lost a piece of its identity. He's been part of the sport for so long. He's won so many races. He's won 2 championships. He is a character, and to see him back on the podium, we knew it was possible, especially from yesterday, even without the grid penalties, that he would put in a good drive today. And the grid penalties to Verstappen and Bottas definitely helped him out to make a push for the podium. And he had, he did get a bit lucky with the virtual safety car at the end after they had to retrieve Latifi's car. But,
that was, I think that was a big moment as well, because Perez was pushing the last few laps. I don't think Perez would have caught him. Maybe if it was like a 60 lap race, he wouldn't have caught him without the virtual safety car, but the virtual safety car definitely did help him.
Yeah. And that's what I was just going to say. Whether Perez would have caught him or not, it probably would have been very close. I don't think he would have made the catch, but because they were stretching it, because Alonso went on the one stop as well. So, that was always going to be close. And he got lucky, but sometimes that's the way it goes. And it's great to see him back on the podium, and hopefully this is the start of something more for Alpine. Maybe they can push for, obviously the rules will be changing for next season, but hopefully this is the start of something, because they got a big win in Budapest with Esteban Ocon. They got a podium now. Maybe this is the start of something new. Who knows?
No, for sure. Exactly. It's going to be good to see. And I think as well, I think I was super happy as well to see him on the podium being since long. And obviously a lot of people, including myself as well, when he came back, he was like, okay, well, he's taking a seat away from Guan Yu Zhou, who was a Renault driver at the, or academy driver, former Renault, but now Alpine as well. It was like, okay, well, Guan Yu Zhou could have gotten that seat. And a lot of people said he was or not really washed, but not really back in form or full in form. But no, he showed it this season that he has it. And I think it was an interesting moment as well, is that Ocon was obviously behind him. He said, okay, tell Ocon to defend like a lion. And Ocon, I mean, he tried his best. But based on the state of his tires compared to Perez's and with the pace of the Red Bull, it just was he tried as much as he could. I think if they were on a closer strategy, if they were both on a fresh set of tires, I think it would have been a lot closer, that battle. And again, Ocon did stick his elbows a little bit out there. He gave him a few good shots, Perez, to keep it close and stuff like that. But again, it just wasn't enough. And I just thought that was interesting to defend like a lion, because obviously he defended well in Budapest to help Ocon secure that win and a good points finish for Alpine.
Yeah, you brought up the defense there, and Ocon did try and retake the position back on the outside at a spot that you cannot overtake on. So, I mean, he did his best, and he did definitely try, and it did hold up Perez just a little bit, and that could very well have made a difference had the virtual safety car not come in at the end. So, I mean, like you said, they were on completely different tires and different states, so it was always gonna be impossible for him. But he did try, and whether he held up Perez just enough had the virtual safety car not played a role, that could have what kept Alonso's podium.
It could have been, yeah, for sure, exactly, because we saw, even going back to Budapest and Hungary, the few laps, like the multiple laps that Hamilton, or that Alonso kept Hamilton behind him, he was ruining his tires. And I think that's the big thing, is when you're fighting behind someone or fighting with someone, you're really pushing the tires to the limit. So I think in that way, if Ocon had kept Perez behind, and I think as well, even for that little battle there, it was still really close, even without if the virtual safety car hadn't happened the last few laps, which I thought was a little bit odd as well, because there's we've seen it before with 2 laps before. They usually don't put all the safety car. They just kind of push everyone through. But I guess there was enough of a reason to have people slow down because it was a safety hazard as well, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. If you could recap this race into 3 words, what would those 3 words be? What would your...
Alonso is back. I mean, the drive that he put in today was fantastic. I mean, no wonder he won driver of the day. It was just a fantastic drive for him. Great to see him back on the podium. And like I said, this could be the start of something big for Alpine with the win earlier in Hungary, and now this podium here in Qatar. This could be, I mean, the rules will be changing next season, but if they're on top of it, then this could be really, really big for them.
No, for sure. I mean, in terms of what we know about the 2022 regulations, in terms of, obviously we know about the 145 million cap, which was introduced this year, but in terms of the other actual regulations, there's a lot unknown that we don't know really how the cars are going to perform, who's going to be fastest. I'm not saying it's going to be crazy, but a lot of teams like Haas and other cars that are near the back, they're preparing for those 2022 season, where they might be really quick going forward for the first couple years into the new regulations. And we might see some different race winners, which would be great to see, because I'd love to see more Alpines winning, more McLarens, more AlphaTauris, not just Mercedes and Red Bull, not just Mercedes. So it would be great to see as well. My 3-word race recap would be probably a 2-stop strategy, because clearly the 1-stop strategy did not work. This is a 2-stop strategy in Qatar. A lot of teams did that. A lot of teams knew that going in, but clearly a lot of teams still felt that okay, we can push for the 1-stop, but it's going to be close even with the hard tires. And clearly it just did not work out. Obviously they had to pit again for sure. And one last thing we want to just talk about as well, and we mentioned earlier, is the constructors battle is intensifying. Only 5 points between Mercedes and Red Bull. Obviously 2 races remain, Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi. who would you say has the upper hand going into these last two races, really?
Well, I mean, from what we know about the track in Jeddah, it seems to be a pretty fast circuit, and right now that's going to be suiting Mercedes because they've got the engine speed that Red Bull just seems to have lost over
Yeah.
the last few races. I don't know what happened. I mean, we saw it in Brazil. It was a track that Red Bull should have done very well at because it was at altitude, but for whatever reason, they just didn't have an answer to Hamilton's charge from the back. And then we saw it here again. Qatar is a decent circuit. It's got a good mix of speed and corners, but there were a lot of high-speed corners that Mercedes was able to take advantage of yesterday and today, as well as the big straight. So from what we know about the track in Saudi Arabia, it does seem right now to be suiting Mercedes a little bit more. And then when you look at Abu Dhabi, that's basically all cornering because it's impossible to overtake there.
Yeah, for
even
sure.
even with the track changes that they've made, it's going to be very difficult to overtake in Abu Dhabi. So, right now it's advantage Mercedes, even though they're behind this. They've done traditionally well in Abu Dhabi. Yes, Verstappen won there last year to end the season, but it's always been a Mercedes track, and it's definitely advantage Mercedes right now, in my opinion.
No, for sure. I would agree with you as well. I think that Mercedes has the upper hand with the pure engine speed of Lewis Hamilton. Now, again, Valtteri Bottas didn't fit a new ICE, but he fitted a new ICE, but it clearly wasn't the improvement that Lewis Hamilton took we saw in Brazil. Now, what was interesting that was revealed recently is that apparently they didn't yet in qualifying alone, so that he didn't yet had fit his new engine. So in qualifying, he was running the old IC, and then after qualifying is when he changed the new IC. So clearly, even in qualifying, we saw, which was odd to hear. I don't know if that was confirmed or I saw it from a source, but so clearly see the pace was even in Mercedes' advantage before that. So I think with that new Mercedes engine that Lewis Hamilton has fitted, we can clearly say the pace advantage going into Mercedes' hand, and Red Bull just haven't got that straight line speed. Obviously, they do well. Even we saw Qatar did have a big long straight, and so does Jeddah, and so does Abu Dhabi. So that's kind of advantage Mercedes with having the long straights and having the advantage of having the pure straight line speed. I think that's the big thing that Mercedes has the advantage over Red Bull with when you're doing your qualifying runs or even in qualifying, getting the fastest lap, because I think that over these next two races, we could see limited overtakes. So if Mercedes is able to get pole position, specifically Lewis Hamilton over Max Verstappen and get a good start, he could just, drive his way to victory in terms of just stay out front, get a good strategy like we saw in Qatar. Because obviously, despite Max Verstappen, quickly going up to, second place within the first 3 laps, Lewis Hamilton was just way ahead of her already. He was clear 6, 7, 8 seconds ahead, which we haven't seen a lot this year of in terms of their battle. We only really seen that is if someone's on older tires or near the end of a race, like we saw in Brazil, is after he passed Lewis Hamilton or after he passed Max Verstappen on fresher tires that were 3 laps newer. So I would say right now Mercedes has the advantage over Red Bull. And the only way Red Bull can hope to really get success is to have Valtteri Bottas continue to struggle. You have to have Perez beat out Bottas multiple times, and you have to have Bottas just struggle to score points in these next few races if you really want a chance to take the lead in the Constructors Championship. And in terms of the Drivers' Championship right now, it's only 8 points. So if Hamilton wins in Jeddah and gets the fastest lap as it stands, and Verstappen were to finish second, they'd be equal on points going into Abu Dhabi, which I think would be absolutely epic to watch. The last race of the year, and they're tied on points, even if they're down by, even if it's 1 or 2 points difference or within 5 points, I think going into the last race within 5 points would be perfect. I think that would be good as well. So I think even as a Verstappen fan, I wouldn't mind Lewis Hamilton winning in Jeddah as long as Verstappen doesn't lose by 15 seconds. As long as the pace is close in terms of the actual pure pace, then I'd say then I wouldn't be worried. But if it was a little bit more than that, then I think I'd definitely be worried going forward, looking at these last 3 races as well. Because obviously looking at Jeddah, is it going to be done? It's getting close to done. Will it be done? That's what we don't know about as well. And then looking at Abu Dhabi with the new changes, not a lot of overtaking happens regardless, but even with the new corner changes and the faster corners that they're trying to put in, we could see limited overtaking as well. But again, it's all up in the air as well. So
I mean, the last time we've seen such a close championship battle like this for drivers and constructors was in 2012 with Vettel and Alonso going at it for Red Bull and Ferrari. And I mean, in 2014, 15, 16, we did see Hamilton and Rosberg go for the title, but that was only between Mercedes because since the new
they were
regulations,
teammates.
yeah, I mean, ever since the new regs came out, the turbo regs in 2014 came out, they've been miles ahead of everybody. And it's only now towards the end of these current aerodynamic regulations that Red Bull have seemingly closed the gap. And then it'll be interesting to see how Red Bull's development, what their focus is like, because if they focus their development for these last two races, whether they found something at headquarters that they can use to improve their cars for the last two races, how is that going to affect their development going into next year's car? And
sure.
That's the thing. That's the interesting thing that I remember hearing it at some point during the season that Mercedes have sort of reached the end of their development stage with their car, but Red Bull were still sort of finding ways they could improve their car.
I do remember that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and whether that has sort of influenced their development for next year's car with the new regs coming in. If Red Bull forced their hand and if Red Bull forced development focus on this year's car, how will that potentially negatively affect next year's car? And if they don't win the title this year, and their car is not that great next year, how's that gonna look?
No, for sure. I would agree. I think Red Bull is going all in this year in terms of winning. They're gambling all their chips and hoping that Max Verstappen can win the World Drivers title and the constructors title as well with the help of Sergio Perez, because that he's gonna need to have some great results these next two races for them to secure the constructors title as well. And I think looking ahead to 2022, we saw, I do remember that hearing that report that Mercedes had stopped development on their 2021 car, and then Red Bull was pushing forward because they were going all in. And I think that's totally true, is because Mercedes have a great car regardless. They've fitted a new engine. They've got the pace. They clearly have made subtle, like they didn't stop developing the car. There's no way they just stopped developing the car, but I think they just made it public known to some people that they're like, okay, we're just going to, slow it down and focus on 2022. Because I think even honestly, if they were to lose by like a point or two this year, Mercedes wouldn't be totally, they wouldn't be upset, because they're like, okay, well, we still have new regs coming next year and our car is showing, great improvements. We're showing great pace. We're focusing on 2022, and that's going to be the next, that's the future of F1 going forward, is these new regulations. So if they're able to stay competitive and just lose, like, let's say, for example, over the next 15 years, they win 7 straight, they lose 1 year, but then they win another 3, whatever it is, that's a win for them. But for Red Bull, okay, you win this year, that's great. You haven't won since 2014. But then if you haven't developed your car for 2022 and you're struggling, then the first couple years to the first 2 years developing, which we kind of saw in 2014, 2015, 2016, even 2017, then it could be a repeat of that early on with the new regulations, where we saw they win, they focus on winning, they win, but then they struggle for those first few seasons of the new regulations.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting when you look further down in the Constructors' Championship battle, how teams like Ferrari and McLaren and Alpine, AlphaTauri, Aston, how all those teams are focusing development. Ferrari are currently ahead by 39.5 points to McLaren, and then you look at Alpine, AlphaTauri, they're only separated by 25 points, which is a full race win, and then because there are a lot of close battles in the Constructors' Championship this season, so it's going to be interesting to see next season how teams focus their development this season, whether they focused on this year's car, whether they focused on 2021 or they focused on 22. Next year, really, we'll see where teams' development focus was, and that's going to be really, really exciting to see.
Yeah, I'm excited, honestly, to see how well the Williams are going to do next year. And as much as I want to say this, but Haas, honestly, because Haas really, they didn't really develop the 2021 car. They knew that. So they are purely focusing on 2022. Not saying they're going to come out and blow the gates off of Mercedes or Red Bull, but I'm saying they could fight for a decent, midfield battle with AlphaTauri or Alpine or Aston Martin. They're not going to just be sitting at the back of the grid constantly. They could, we've seen it a couple times this year with Mick Schumacher putting the car into Q3, even this year's car, which isn't great. So imagine next year what they can do under the new regulations. And obviously, with the new regulations, they're hoping for closer racing, closer lap times between the cars, between the teams. So it should prove for some great racing as well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Haas came out early and they said, we're not going to develop this year's car. We're focusing entirely on next year's car. So, yeah, like you said, Mick Schumacher putting the car into Q2 every now and then. It was exciting to see. And I mean, next year we'll sort of see the true. I mean, Haas will be the benchmark for how different the cars are from 2021. 2020 really, because this year's cars were just a holding pattern from last year's. They didn't really change anything because of the pandemic. So it's going to be really cool to see the differences between the cars of this year and last year compared to next year. And Haas is going to be the true benchmark because they, like you said, they stopped all development for this year's car and they're focusing entirely on next year. And then we can sort of see where the other team's development focus was on, how much they developed their cars and in relation to Haas's cars.
No, for sure. Exactly. So, and that will pretty much do it for our show. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out theintermissionsports.com for more content. And obviously, we'll be back in 2 weeks for the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix pre-race show. Make sure to check it out. Obviously, going to be an exciting race. Only 8 points between Verstappen and Hamilton and 5 points between Mercedes and Red Bull. And have a happy Sunday.